One of the people Khodorkovsky left behind was his eldest son, Pavel. When his father was arrested in 2003, Pavel was at college in the United States, intending to return to Russia once his studies were over. But since his father was jailed, Pavel has been afraid to go back and now campaigns for his father from the United States. He joins us now from our New York studios. Thanks so much for being with us. Our heart goes out to you and to your father on a day like today. How is he?
Thank you, Jonathan. And first of all, I wanted to thank you because I remember 10 years ago you actually opened up coverage of my father's arrest in October. So it has come full circle 10 years ago. My father remains very strong. I spoke to him last Saturday on a phone. He gets about 15 minutes every Saturday to call his family. He's always very upbeat, and he actually gives our family the moral support every time he speaks to us.
Now, you say he's upbeat. He isn't upbeat when it comes to Russia and its future. He wrote an essay in the New York Times to coincide with this anniversary, and in it he said, speaking about President Putin's Kremlin, an irremovable and out-of-control central power is losing the ability to adapt to an ever more changing world. It is incapable of offering an attractive vision for the future. Clearly, your father is no fan of Putin's Russia, but what message was he trying to send to the world and to Russia in particular?
My father's message has been consistent throughout the years. It is time for Russia to change. It's time for the economy to modernize and for the government to start bringing reforms to life that are so desperately needed by the society. And whereas 10 years ago the society was largely dormant, in the past couple of years it has awoken, and it's actively asking for change.
Now, people in Russia know the name better than people around the world. Your father was never really a household name, and now it's been 10 years, and they may be wondering about why he is in jail, about the allegations against him, the charges. But there's a famous story about your father, in fact, about him and several other of the country's most powerful and wealthy people, that President Putin made a deal even before he was president. He had an ultimatum. You stay rich if you stay out of politics. If you go into politics, I will break you and you'll lose all of your wealth. And is that the simplest way to explain what happened to your father, that he didn't do what Putin wanted?
Well, they certainly had a disagreement back in 2003. Probably one of the most vivid examples of their confrontation was in February of 2003 when my father brought up the topic of corruption and mentioned it at the meeting with Vladimir Putin. Other leading businessmen were present, but my father was the one to bring up the topic. Now, back then, it was probably an unwelcome revelation coming from one of the richest men in Russia. But today, the problem of Russian corruption gets experienced by pretty much every single citizen of Russia.
Now, he could be out in just a few months if they don't extend his sentence again the way they did a few years back. What does he plan to do? A lot of other smart, powerful people have left Russia. Is he going to get out of Russia for his own good, do you think?
Well, it's certainly going to be my goal to try to convince him to leave Russia, because I believe even after his release, he would face unnecessary risk if he remains back home. However, my father doesn't like to think about his upcoming release. He knows that everything is possible in a country where there is no rule of law, and certainly our family's hopes have been crushed in the past. So he doesn't think about what he's going to do or doesn't try to make any concrete plans. But it's going to be my job to try and convince him to leave.
And what about Russia? Was he right 10 years ago when he warned about the state that Vladimir Putin was creating? I mean, has President Putin won? Your father's behind bars, and if anything, Mr. Putin's more powerful than ever.
Well, I think what has happened over the past 10 years is that certainly country as a whole has improved in terms of its economy. Even though it has come at a large cost to the other sectors, our export sector is strong enough to buoy the state and buoy the society. But people are starting to see that this is not a long-term path that's going to continue the growth that everyone has grown accustomed to in the past decade. And in that respect, I think there is a vision that's much more sustainable, and that vision includes the reforms. My father has said time and again that he hopes Putin would finally realize that this is an inevitable process and takes the steps forward necessary.
Pavel Khodorkovsky, still campaigning, still crusading for your father after a very dark decade. Thanks so much for talking with us.
Thank you, Jonathan.